Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is December 23rd, 2023, Saturday, December 23rd, 2023. And our first story is out of out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, titled The Back Door to Hell. During the summer of 2023, archaeologists made a strange discovery under a Mexican church that proved a local legend was indeed true. Before the birth of Christ, first the Zapotec and then the Mixtec people flourished in the valley of Tacalula, which lay approximately 300 miles south of Mexico City. They built a temple and a city named Mitla, Nahuatl word Mictlan, which means place of the dead. In adoration to their cult of the dead, they built massive tombs filled with grave goods. It functioned as a cemetery for the Zapotec and Mixtec until the late 15th century, when the site was abandoned, most probably due to attacks by the Aztec, who sacked it in 1494. By the 16th century, the population consisted of more than 500,000 people. The culture over the centuries developed a hierarchical society governed by elites. Dominican friars arrived in 1529 and built a plain adobe chapel dedicated to San Pablo, close to where the abandoned ruins of Mitla stood. Within 20 years, the friars had outgrown the chapel, and they decided to build a larger church on higher ground on top of part of the ruins. In 1553, Joaquin, Archbishop Albuquerque, ordered Mitla dismantled in order to use stone blocks and other materials to build several Catholic churches in the area. Most of it, though, was used for the Church of San Pablo. St. Paul, or San Pablo of Thebes, or St. Paul the Hermit, is a saint associated with caves and other underground spaces, so perhaps the dedication to this saint was more than coincidental. In 1603, and then 3 years later, earthquakes struck the area and the mission was damaged. The friars fled to a monastery just outside the city. By 1617, using what was left of their prior structure, a reconstruction started for a larger church, which was completed by 1650. During this time period, Francisco de Burgoa, a Dominican priest who acted as a historian, wrote books on what was then known as the province of Antequera, which is now Oaxaca. In 1674, he described a visit to the ruins of the city of Mitla. He recorded stories of a vast underground temple with 4 chambers, one which had a door leading to a cavern. This was believed by the Zapotec builders to be the entrance to Liboa, or the underworld. The first chamber was a chapel, the second was the burial place of the high priest, the third held the bodies of the kings along with their goods, and the fourth was the location of a door that led to a dark and gruesome tomb. The missionaries explored the interior beyond the sealed door secured with a stone slab. They used a rope to make sure they would not be lost inside the inky interior. De Burgoa described it thus, quote, "Through this door they threw the bodies of the victims of the great lords and chieftains who had fallen in battles." End quote. Exploration of the chamber beyond the door found putrefaction, foul odors, poisonous reptiles, among other horrors. A cold wind snuffed out their torches, which stopped them from exploring further. They believed the temple was a site for an evil spirit and its demoniacal servants. It was after this that the entrance was walled up to what they considered a back door to hell. De Burgoa said the entry could be found under the main altar of the church that was built over the ruins. Despite its sinister reputation, de Burgoa described the skilled construction and the mosaics of the place. In 1696, another earthquake collapsed the church roof. It reopened in 1728, including a rosary chapel. In 1787, an 8.6 magnitude earthquake struck the area. The disturbance was so severe it caused a tsunami. Despite the efforts of the Dominicans, who had reconstructed the church and monastery more than once, a contentious relationship with the diocesan clergy slowly eroded the control they had over the native parishes. In 1856, the monastery was ordered closed under the reform. However, Mitla had been discovered by archaeologists in 1834. There was only evidence of small chambers, but nothing that matched de Burgoa's description. Archaeologists continued to explore the area until 1960. It was also a tourist destination starting in the late 1800s, which coincided with the building of a new road. This also prompted the building of homes and workshops where the mission once stood, and many of the buildings were demolished. 100 years later, most of the priory had disappeared, leaving only doorways. However, what lay underneath the church remained hidden. The ruins of Mitla are not only below the church itself. In 1890, a wall measuring 396 yards and 12 feet high had been discovered as part of Mitla. In 1902, Professor Marshall H. Seville with the American Museum of Natural History heard of a cruciform subterranean chamber, which he was told was 5 to 6 miles from the palaces of Mitla on the topmost range of hills called Guironi. He went with 150 men to the hill and started to dig. A cross was found at the northeastern end of a great cement-paved plaza with various mounds, one of them with 5 terraces. This structure was described by Frenchman Captain Dupas in his book Antiquities Mexicaines. Seville found the cross had been intentionally filled with earth and cobblestones, but there were no human remains. The entire interior was covered with Mitla fret and decorations. The cross measured 28 feet in length. The width of the arms was 5 feet and the depth 7 feet. Compass readings show that the longest arm is oriented about 17 degrees to the east of north. As such, Guirin or Guironi, like other Mesoamerican sites, including Teotihuacan, Chichen Itza, and Tula, are all oriented between 15.5 and 17 degrees to the east of north. Each fret had a zigzag design which scholars called the Greek fret, and others said was the Egyptian meander. Dr. Nelly Robles documented in 1994 a study that at least 9 major quarries in the area of Mitla alone contained an estimated 200 megalithic stone blocks in various stages of completion, the majority of which were in the 5 to 10 tons range. They could have been the source for the materials used to build Mitla. The technique employed for cutting and transporting the enormous stone block remains a mystery. Recently, with the use of a non-destructive geophysical methods, archaeologists with the ARX project decided to explore the church as a most likely spot that would match the Burgoa's description, since this area is known for natural caverns. They found evidence of what was once believed to be a myth. This was the large subterranean rooms described by Francisco de Burgoa. There is also evidence of an earlier ruin in another part of the site. A 3D model of the site was produced, which confirmed the existence of a large void under the main altar. This space seems to connect with another void to the north of the church. There's also evidence of a blocked entrance under the altar and 2 passages. The team plans to return later in 2023 to resume exploration of what lays underneath the church. Let us hope that one myth that is not disproven is that it is the back door to hell. Present-day travel to Huaca is highly dangerous. In May 2023, Victor Masson, 27, a Canadian national, was found shot to death inside a car. He was close to a coastal tourist area in the state of Huaca. Only days before, 3 tourists from Argentina were attacked with a machete. One of them died a few days later in a hospital. The attack took place in the Laguna de Chachua along the Pacific coast. There was no motive for the attack. The reason this was included is that, for people thinking, oh, I'm going to take a trip and check it out, it's a dangerous place to go. And now you ask yourself, apparently the size of this Mitla was huge. They had 5 miles across, and then you think the mystery of, like, in all of these ancient constructions is, how did they transport these pieces of stone from a quarry over to fit them that were weighing 5 to 10 tons? How did they do that? That's incredible. And then there's something happened that after all that work, they decided to fill in part of it. That's incredible. That's a lot of mystery right there. Next story is out of the Mirror, and this is titled, Man Finds Secret Door Inside His Hotel Wardrobe, and What Lurks Behind It is Terrifying. I mean, now that we're talking about weird places behind the door. A man has shared the moment he found an eerie secret door inside his hotel room, and it's truly terrifying. When staying in a hotel, you wouldn't think too much about what lies behind the walls, other than another person sleeping in the room next door perhaps, but after inspecting his humble abode for the night, one guest noticed something a little more sinister in his room. Videoing his room, he stumbled across a secret door located in his wardrobe. As Narnia-like as this may sound, he then became invested in what was hiding behind the secret door. Taking a video of his hotel room, the unnamed bloke opened the wardrobe and found the usual hotel items in their hangers, an ironing board, and an iron. But he took a second look when he saw the doors at the back of the wardrobe. Some people may ignore stumbling across a secret door due to the fear of the unknown, but this curious guest wasn't going to leave it, so he decided to check it out for himself. He used his hotel keycard to open the small double doors in the wardrobe as he videoed the process and managed to climb through the wardrobe doors into the secret compartment. He then panned the camera around the secret room behind his wardrobe, and there were no lights, so the dark, strange room seemed even scarier. Once through the wardrobe doors, he appeared to come across another room, and once through the second door, he seemed to be on the other side of his actual room, in an eerie and abandoned section of the hotel room. He shared the creepy video on X, as many people came up with all sorts of conspiracies about why the room is there, and a lot of users were quick to claim they wouldn't be able to stay in the room. I wouldn't even open the first door. I will call room service to have my room changed, one wrote. Another added, I wouldn't be able to sleep in the room after finding this out. Whereas another chimed, the owner of the hotel must be into something deadly. And a second said, the only thing that should kick in here are your survival instincts. A lot is definitely going on in this room. Let's face it. It could be. Let's take a look at this clip real quick. Let's see what he has to say on here. And he's showing, for those of you that not seeing the video version, is showing him. By the way, it looks like a very nice hotel room. It looks a very nice. This is not. And he opens up his closet door, and he's panning around. This is like a closet, like a very inside the bathroom. And by the way, there's no audio on this, so it's not that I'm not. And he opens up another one, and he uses, it's like a that second set of doors they don't have a handle, so he just like slides his key card in between and opens it up, and then sure enough, there's a passage that's on the other side of his room, even the bathroom of all places. And then another door, which you could tell leads into something else. I'm telling you, this might all be innocent, and maybe they restored this hotel and they didn't use. I mean, I don't really know how old this hotel is or even where it's at because they don't mention it. But you know what? I agree with all these other people. I wouldn't. I just even if even if you don't think I'm going to be attacked, just the idea that I might be spied on, or that you could be sleeping and somebody comes in while you're sleeping through one of these doors back there, I'd be like, heck no, no way. Uh-uh. So anyway, we're back to another story that's stranger than fiction stories. This one's titled Chicago Fiend Murders. On a frigid day in January of 1910, the Chicago headlines trumpeted Chicago Fiend's second Whitechapel Ripper. The reason for the sensational story was based on the opinion of Assistant Police Chief Schutler, following the coroner's report from postmortem completed on the body of Mrs. Jenny Cleghorn, aka Anna Furlong. She had been found mutilated and decapitated in a South Side rooming house, which doubled as a brothel situated over a saloon owned by James Seeley at 1702 Armour Avenue. Little did the police or the public know that this grisly crime was only the beginning. A few years before, Lizzie Borden was acquitted of killing her parents, and Jack the Ripper had stalked the streets of London. Closer to home, H. Holmes had lured his victims who were visiting Chicago to his notorious murder castle and swung from the gallows in 1896. The police believed the murderer had crept into the woman's flat while she slept, but it was a mystery as to how he had gained entry. He then strangled her since her trachea had been crushed, and then, with a dull knife, he went on to chop, hack, and slash the woman's body. Other stories describe the murder weapon as an axe. The police found her body clad only in a nightgown. The room reflected that the woman had fought terribly for her life. The furniture and walls of the room were spattered with blood. The killer cut out her heart and other organs and then replaced them inside the body cavity. In an effort to hide her identity, he took the head. Her scalp had been torn from her skull and was found with an ear attached under the bed wrapped in bedclothing. The police also found that the incisions made on the body were done with surgical skill. Sound familiar? The following is one of the stories that details the story, and it appeared in the Dayton Herald dated January 20th, 1910, of this horror discovery on a very cold winter day in the Windy City's south side. Quote, the head could not be found, but part of the right ear and the scalp above it remained on the bed. The dull knife which was used to sever the head had also been used freely on the trunk. Across the abdomen were half a dozen long slashes, and the knife had evidently been plunged several times into the vitals. The police immediately detained Tilly Taylor, proprietress of the house, of which Miss Furlong was an inmate, and one other woman. That the Furlong woman had been brought up to a life of refinement was indicated by the neatness and care with which she kept her effects. Her nails were carefully manicured, and much fashionable clothing was found in closets of her room. From the appalling brutality, the police concluded it was inspired either by an insane jealousy or revenge on part of some enemy. A score of detectives were sent out to look up all the women's men's acquaintances with a view of discovering, if possible, what enemies she had. End quote. The Paris was a saloon and brothel in Chicago's Levee district, located at 2101 Armour Street. It was only a few blocks from the scene of the crime in a similar establishment. The owner of this one was convicted of running a white slavery ring. A few days before the discovery of Jenny Cleghorn's body, the already notorious Tenderloin area of Chicago made the newspapers with the death of Nathaniel Nat F. Moore. He was the son of James Hobart Moore, one of the brothers who controlled the Rock Island Railroad system. He died after 54 hours of debauchery while in the brothel belonging to Veronica Vick Shaw, located at 2014 Dearborn Street. The coroner said his heart had given out. Moore would leave his young wife alone at their apartment at 1100 Lakeshore Drive. She was formerly Miss Helen Fargo, a New York society girl. It seemed that Nat was attracted to the bad girls. Big Fitzgerald, a saloon keeper at 12th Street and Wabash Avenue, formerly Nat Moore's chauffeur, had gone to a Levee saloon with him, where they drank wine, and then, after closing hour, they went to the Shaw Resort. The week before, Moore had written out a check for $1,500 in payment of his last carousal bill at the brothel. In those years, that was a small fortune. Madam Vick Shaw was married to Roy Jones, who was a red light saloon keeper. He and Pearl Dorset, an inmate at the Shaw whorehouse, were the ones who told the police of the hours preceding Moore's death. They had called Dr. M.F. Murray when Moore complained that he couldn't sleep. Moore asked him for unadulterated morphine, but the doctor refused. Instead, the doctor gave him injections of morphine adulterated with sulfate of atropine. Later, the cause of death was given as heart failure. Moore had an income of $50,000 per year, which he had spent in wild and riotous living. His escapades had made him a national character. He had received $750,000 on his 21st birthday. He was 25 years old when he died. Nat Moore's young widow was described as prostrate with grief, and after the burial, she left to New York. However, by October, she had returned to Chicago. Heartbroken or not, by October 1911, she married Lemuel Hastings Arnold IV. Like her first husband, Lemuel was wealthy. He came from a prominent New England family that dated back to the Revolutionary War. One of his ancestors was a member of the Continental Congress, and his great-grandfather was governor of Rhode Island. An uncle had been a general in the Civil War. Lemuel Hastings Arnold might have come from a prestigious family, but he was not immune to bad luck in his personal life. In 1905, he married Marie Hoisington of Woodbury Holmes. Marie Hoisington Woodbury Holmes, that's her entire name, sorry. A divorcee and widow with a mysterious past. One of her prior engagements was broken off after it was exposed she was an adventuress. 4 years after the marriage, she went to Reno and asked for a divorce. Within months of securing her divorce, she married Samuel Willits. It seemed his luck turned when he married Helen Moore in 1911, but within 6 years he was dead at the age of 35. There was no mention of his death in the newspapers, and considering the prominence of the family, this seems strange unless the circumstances of death could be embarrassing, like a suicide. Perhaps it was the notoriety of Nat Moore's death in a South Side brothel, which gave more than normal attention to Annie Furlong's savage murder. It was during the police investigation that her true identity became known as Jenny Cleghorn. Police were mystified how a 51-year-old woman came to live upstairs from a mixed-race saloon, which were known to be brothels. She appeared to come from a genteel background, and witnesses who knew her said she once owned considerable property in Inglewood. Her nails were carefully manicured, and fashionable clothing was found in the closets of her room. She said her husband, Hugh Cleghorn, made her convert her property into cash, after which he abandoned her for another woman. Review of the 1900 census confirms her claim. She lived in Chicago and ran a rooming house along with her husband with several male boarders. Without a husband or property, friends deserted her, and she drifted to the underworld of St. Louis. There she remained until 5 or 6 months before her murder, when she moved back to Chicago. On January 24th, Jenny's head was found in a vacant lot at 251 Armour Avenue, which was 6 blocks away. Two small boys came across something wrapped and frozen inside 4 towels. It was the victim's head, with her mouth cut from ear to ear. The skull was crushed. The police believed it had been thrown there since the day of the murder. During those days after Jenny's murder, Hugh Cleghorn of Geneva, Wisconsin, came forward to identify himself as the victim's husband, but stated that he would have nothing further to do with the case. More than likely, he was trying to verify if she had any money or jewelry he could claim. In essence, he left her to be interred in a potter's grave at the Cook County Cemetery, where indigents ended up. Strangely, in April of 1910, 4 months after Jenny's killing, Hugh Cleghorn was listed as living with his wife Blanche and their 17-year-old son Walter on the census. Had he married after Jenny's death, and Walter was a son from a previous marriage, or was he a bigamist? There is proof that Jenny Clark married Hugh Cleghorn on March 11, 1894 in Chicago, but he would not be the first person to be leading a double life, especially if his spouse lived in another state. During this investigation, Coroner Hoffman noted the coincidence that on the same date of January 20th, 2 years before, almost to the hour, another woman was murdered. She was found in Lake Michigan off Jackson Park. She was nude and the corpse was headless. A portion of the lower jaw clung to the torso. The top of the head was completely missing. Most of the bones in the body were broken, and the police wondered if the body had also been caught in a steamer's propellers. The woman was estimated to be about 25 years old, stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, and was blonde. She had been nude when she went into the water 1 month to 2 weeks before the discovery of the body. The theory was entertained if the women had been victims of some secret cult or organization that used this date as a special anniversary. The victim was never identified. Shortly after the murder, the police were considering several of the visitors or roomers as suspects and detained them, even going to Louisville to bring one of them back to Chicago. They even entertained the idea the murderer was female. The police considered the woman's murder as one of the worst crimes in the history of Chicago's underworld. A clue found in the room was a man's celluloid collar size 17 with a black bow tie. A butcher's knife with a dull blade, which showed evidence of having been wiped on a piece of newspaper, was found to be the murder weapon. Like the Ripper murders, the coroner believed the killer had some knowledge of anatomy. Those detained were all released, and by the end of 1910, the police had no leads. But that changed a few months later when another murder was committed. However, not all Chicago brothels were dark and dangerous places. Ada and Mina Everly, born Ada and Mina Sims, were 2 sisters who operated the Everly Club, a high-priced brothel in the Levee district of Chicago during the first decade of the 20th century. They catered to men with deeper pockets. Neither married and technically died spinsters. Mina passed away in 1948, age 82, and Ada in 1960, aged 95. They were both interred in the family's plot in St. Paul's Cemetery in Alexandria City, Virginia. But for other women, working in a Chicago whorehouse could prove to be quite deadly. In May of 1910, 4 months after Jenny Cleghorn's death, another victim was found murdered. She was killed in a West Side rooming house located at 133 South Morgan Street, with her head nearly severed and the body terribly slashed. The young woman's body was found fully clothed within 10 hours of her death. The room exhibited evidence of a terrific struggle. The golden-haired girl remained unidentified. In June 1910, Galesko and Chevy was arrested for the murder of Jenny Cleghorn. It appeared he had told several persons that he had committed the murder. When police searched his room, they found a book on surgery, a pair of surgeon shears, and a dirk knife that appeared stained with blood. After his arrest, he was sent to Cook County Insane Asylum at Dunning. Then he was deported to his native Bulgaria, where he escaped from an insane asylum, then smuggled himself back into the United States. 2 years passed, and the newspapers reported on the death of the Pfanschmidt family. They claimed it was the work of the Axemen, who had killed several families in the Midwest and had returned to Illinois. The family consisted of the parents and their daughter Blanche, and a fourth person, Emma Mapin. They were killed in the house, and then it was burned down. The newspaper said the number of the Axemen's victims totaled 26. By 1914, Assistant Chief Schutler suspected that Galesko and Chevy, the confessed slayer of Jenny Cleghorn, was the Axeman. He wrote incoherent, taunting letters to Schutler. It was during these years that the various killings of families throughout the Midwest were reported. Schutler described where each murder occurred just after the change of the moon from the last dark quarter, and always on Sunday nights, which alienists reported as when most lunatics were active. The crimes were committed as a killer moved eastward along railroad lines. In 1914, another family had been slain on Blue Island, again with the use of an axe. What became of the man responsible for what became known as the Midwest Axeman murders were never solved, as were the killings of the three women in Chicago between 1910 to 1912. Was it the work of the same person? This question also remains unanswered. So there you go. And that's the thing. A lot of these women that went into to work at these brothels, they would change their name. Nobody would even know. Even the people that work with them would know their real name. Usually they did it just for anonymity, or they didn't want their family to find out what they were doing or anything to go back to the family. So sometimes even if they would have given a name, more than likely it wasn't even their real name. So, and again, was this guy on Chevy that Axeman, which is true. They never really caught who it was, and they believed he used the railroad tracks. So, I mean, some people group some of the murders together, others say it was a different person, but bottom line, that person was never apprehended. The next story is out of Vintage News, and it's titled Cecil Hotel, the Los Angeles lodging with a history marred by tragedy. Nestled in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, the Cecil Hotel stands as a sentinel to a bygone era. Its history is interwoven with tales of glamour, mystery, and tragedy. Since its opening in 1927, the site has become an infamous landmark, attracting attention not for its architectural beauty or hospitality, but instead for the dark events that have unfolded within its walls. In its heyday, the Cecil Hotel was a beacon of opulence amid the revolutionary atmosphere of the Roaring Twenties. Erected in 1924 by three hoteliers, it was designed in the opulent Beaux Art style, meaning the project had a pretty hefty price tag of $1.5 million. Boasting an impressive 700 rooms over 14 floors, the Cecil Hotel promised a glamorous stay for the well-to-do travelers and socialites of the era. Its most notable feature was its magnificent marble lobby, boasting stained glass windows and alabaster statues. For those keen on keeping their public image up, the location was the place to stay. While the Cecil Hotel was able to navigate the Great Depression with relative ease, the same couldn't be said for the surrounding area. The effects of economic decline began to show, with Los Angeles' Central City East region earning the moniker Skid Row for the increase in number of homeless individuals living on the streets. The Cecil Hotel's shift from elegance to infamy was gradual but unyielding. Over the years, the location found itself at the center of numerous unsettling events, from untimely deaths to criminal activities. The first person to take their own life there was W.K. Norton, who in 1931 died in his room after taking capsules containing poison. This tragedy was followed by other suicides over the 1940s and 50s, leading the Cecil Hotel to earn the grim moniker, the Suicide. Along with being the site of many untimely deaths, the Cecil Hotel also became a popular spot for illicit drug use and prostitution, largely due to its affordability and the anonymity it afforded to its guests. There was even a gruesome murder that took place in 1964, which remains unsolved. The Cecil Hotel's guest list reads like a who's who of the criminal underworld, further cementing its unsavory reputation. Notably, it's rumored to have housed serial killers Richard Ramirez the Night Stalker and Jack Unterweger, who reportedly continued his murderous activity while staying at the location. These chilling associations have added a layer of infamy to the Cecil Hotel's history, making it a focal point for true crime enthusiasts and historians alike. While the aforementioned events lent themselves to the Cecil Hotel's reputation, it was the 2013 disappearance and death of Canadian tourist Elisa Lam that brought it into their wider public consciousness. In early 2013, Lam had been visiting California on a solo trip. On January 28th, she checked into the Cecil Hotel and, while initially assigned to a shared room, was moved after her roommates complained to staff about odd behavior, including writing concerning notes and not allowing them into the room without a password. Her unusual behavior was further documented at a live taping of the late-night show Conan. While Lam was scheduled to check out on January 31st, she never did, and no one could get a hold of her. This prompted her parents to report her missing to the Los Angeles Police Department, who searched the premises and obtained surveillance footage, the latter of which saw her acting strangely in an elevator. This prompted several theories, with some speculating she was hiding from someone and others believing her actions were the result of her struggles with mental health. She'd been diagnosed with depression and bipolar. Many have even speculated that her movements were the result of paranormal goings-on. On February 19th, after guests had complained of low water pressure and an odd taste, Lamb's body was found floating in one of the Cecil Hotel's rooftop water tanks. While an autopsy was unable to concretely determine the cause of death, the coroner deemed it an accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder being a contributing factor. Over the years, numerous guests and employees have reported strange occurrences, from ghost sightings to unexplained noises, contributing to the Cecil Hotel's haunted reputation as one of the most haunted hotels in the world. Many have speculated that the spirits of those who've lost their lives in the premises haunt the site, creating an eerie stay for those brave enough to book a room. These tales have become part of the Cecil Hotel's lore, attracting paranormal investigators and thrill seekers eager to experience the supernatural firsthand. Whether these stories are rooted in fact or fueled by the hotel's tragic past, they add another layer of intrigue to this storied establishment. The Cecil Hotel has captivated the imagination of artists and creators, influencing various works of fiction and documentaries. Its eerie ambiance and sinister history have made it an ideal setting for horror stories, most notably serving an inspiration for the fifth season of American Horror Story. The phenomenon of true crime tourism has brought a new type of visitor to the Cecil Hotel, those drawn by its grim past. This fascination with the macabre raised ethical considerations about the consumption of tragedy for entertainment. With a 2021 net documentary crime scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, only fueling the intrigue. What does the future of the Cecil Hotel look like? The Cecil Hotel's location adjacent to Skid Row plays a significant role in its narrative. The area's homeless population and socio-economic challenges have impacted the site's identity and clientele, and its fate has since been drawn into discussions regarding social responsibility and urban development. In 2017, the Los Angeles City Council voted to make Cecil House a historic cultural monument, with it closing to undergo renovations that same year. Following a delay, it was reopened in 2021 as an affordable housing complex. Hey. While it's difficult to predict what the site's future will look like, it appears as though it will be working to change the public's perception of it from a location of tragedy to one that aims to give struggling families a chance. Come on. Nobody, I don't care how famous, what it is, nobody wants to walk through a homeless camp to get to the hotel. And I don't think that after that affordable housing, yeah, bye-bye Cecil Hotel. I don't think it's going to be around for long. And that's what I believe, because guess what? It's dangerous to go to places like that. I don't care what anybody says. And I'm not talking about the hauntings. Next story is out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled Death by Fish. On an autumn day in 1912, A family of five set out on the Pigeon River in a canoe. The father was intent on fishing, and the rest of the family to enjoy a day on the water. In this peculiar story, they found anything but what they sought. It's Toronto, Canada, 1912. William McCafferty brought his wife, his mother, and his two children, aged 8 and 13, on a fishing trip. Little did he imagine that the 14-pound muskie he hooked would end all their lives. McCafferty, who was a sales manager for Canadian General Electric Company, made the worst decision when he believed a frail canoe would be enough to keep a party of five afloat. Evening fell and the family had not returned. Charles McCafferty, William's father, had stayed behind, and he became alarmed. A search party quickly organized, and 7 miles down the river they found the canoe floating bottom up. All the bodies were recovered when they dragged the river. The cause of the horrible accident became evident when clutched in McCafferty's hand was the fishing line with the muskellunge still hooked. It was alive and thrashed violently when it was drawn in. It seemed that McCafferty had fallen into the river, and when trying to get back into the canoe, he overturned it. None of his family knew how to swim. In 2021, it was reported that a 56-year-old man fishing on a recreational boat in northern Australia was struck on the left side by a Spanish mackerel that jumped out of the water. It weighed approximately 44 pounds. After hitting the man, it landed inside the vessel. The fisherman was seen by witnesses moving to the bow, where his condition deteriorated. Medical assistance was brought immediately, and he died an hour later despite resuscitative efforts. He was hit by the fish below his left nipple. An autopsy showed considerable blunt force traumatic injury to the left inferior part of the chest and at the abdomen directly under the point of impact. His 7th to 9th rib were fractured, and he had 250 milliliters of blood in the peritoneal cavity. In 2015, a 5-year-old girl traveling on a boat on the Swanee River died when a sturgeon jumped into the boat and hit her. Her brother and mother were also injured. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission said this was the first fatality. However, 4 people have been injured by sturgeons that year alone. These fish are known for leaping more than 7 feet above water. They have hard plates along their back and grow up to 8 feet long and weigh 200 pounds. In 2020, a woman was standing in chest-deep water at North Star Village along the Winnipeg River when she was attacked by a muskie. The fish bit her leg and moved her from side to side and pulled her underwater. The year before, Captain Rudy Yanez, 47, was on his boat when he was impaled by a swordfish. The incident happened in Honokahu Small Boat Harbor, Hawaii, when a swordfish measuring 4 to 6 feet with a 3-foot bill was found in the harbor. This is unusual since this fish is usually found in deep waters. The captain was aware of the value of the swordfish meat and dived in to spear it. His line became entangled with the boat's mooring line. The swordfish spun backwards and speared Yanez in the chest. Broadbill swordfish are referred to as gladiators of the sea. They're notoriously powerful and prone to fits of rage, especially after becoming hooked by anglers. There are reports that these fish have attacked boats, even a submersible vessel, which was at 2,000 feet of depth. When the sub was brought up, the swordfish was still attached and dead. They put up a lengthy fight, which is why they're sought after by sports fishermen. Zane Grey, a well-known author of adventure stories, once hooked a giant swordfish off Santa Catalina Island that fought him through the day and into the night. About 11 hours later, it broke the line and swam off. So there you go. Death by fish. But you never know. And our last story is out of Anomelian, and it is titled, Man Went to Alaska to Look for the Black Pyramid and Went Missing. On May 27, 2020, a 41-year-old named Nathan Campbell hired a charter plane out of Talkeetna to fly him to a small lake in the northwest corner of Denali National Park. Along with some basic camping gear, Campbell brought a hefty cache of food stored in plastic tubs and a 2-way satellite communicator to check in with his wife and kids. He planned to spend the next 4 months alone smack dab in the center of interior Alaska. Campbell had picked a strange place for a summer vacation. The plane had dropped him on the shores of Kerry Lake, a mile-long splat of blue surrounded by hundreds of square miles of uninhabited wilderness, filled with some of the roughest terrain in Alaska. Travel in any direction would require fighting his way through head-high alder thickets and waist-deep beaver ponds. To reach the nearest town, Lake Michumina, population 13, would require a week of hellish bushwhacking on foot. If it was solitude Campbell was looking for, he surely found it. But Campbell wasn't there for fun. He was on a mission. On the long flight from Talkeetna to Kerry Lake, while the vast green carpet of the boreal forest floated beneath them, the usually shy Campbell told his pilot, Jason Sturgis, how he planned to spend his summer. Campbell had come to Kerry Lake to search for something that until now only existed in the darkest, least updated corners of the internet, the Black Pyramid, a massive underground structure rumored to be 4 times the size of the famous Cheops in Egypt and thousands, if not millions of years old. Conspiracy theorists claim the structure is so powerful, its importance to national security so tantamount, that all traces of the pyramid and the military base believed to protect it have been wiped from satellite imagery. All the bush pilots, trappers, and natives had traveled to the area around Kerry Lake for generations. A quick search through the Fairbanks Daily News Miner archives shows few references to a giant alien pyramid or top-secret base in central Alaska. But then again, until Nathan Campbell showed up, no one had been really looking for it, and his reasons for starting a search deep in the Alaskan wilderness, if you follow the nebulous logic of conspiracy theory, makes perfect sense. First, the Black Pyramid fits neatly into the pantheon of paranoid-inducing military installations in Alaska. The most infamous of these is the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HARP, located just outside of Fairbanks. Depending on who you ask, HARP is a high-frequency transmitter used to remotely set off earthquakes to topple Venezuelan dictators, control the world's climate, and undermine the fossil fuel industry, or help scientists study the ionosphere. Take your pick. Second, the supposed location of the Black Pyramid has long been recognized as an area of geostrategic importance. In the 1930s, General Billy Mitchell, the so-called father of the U.S. Air Force, saw that Lake Minchumina, about 40 miles north of where Campbell landed at Kerry Lake, was equidistant to the major urban industrial centers of the Northern Hemisphere. That meant, with the same tank of fuel, a B-52 taking off from the shores of Lake Minchumina could strike Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow, Paris, or even New York. In modern warfare, General Mitchell had shown that the middle of nowhere could become the center of everything. Then in the early 90s came the real evidence for the Black Diamond. Scientists studying shockwaves from a 1992 Chinese underground nuclear test recorded a grainy, pyramid-shaped spot of interference 700 feet below the surface of interior Alaska. Age, origin, and function unknown. Pyramids have a special allure in conspiracy theory and the New Age. According to internet gurus, the unique shape of a pyramid resonates energy that even in a palm-sized object made of base quartz can tenderize meat, improve your sex life, and eliminate foul odors from your bathroom. If the results of the nuclear test were true, and there was a giant pyramid beneath the center of Alaska, then its powers could undoubtedly be immense, capable of emitting energy waves that could make an outhouse in Fairbanks smell like springtime or produce mind-blowing orgasms 1,000 miles away on the outskirts of Dawson City, as long as you and your partner are tuned to the pyramid's frequency, of course. The Black Pyramid got more traction after a hot tip from an anonymous retired naval captain on the legendary conspiracy theory radio program Coast to Coast. Throughout the 80s, the captain worked on top-secret radar installations in Alaska. For years, he noticed that a mysterious, massively powerful source of electromagnetism near Lake Minchumina was disrupting his base's aircraft and communication. Now, after seeing the results of the Chinese test, the captain realized the source of the disturbances: a massive underground pyramid-shaped structure in the heart of Alaska that was not shown on any map or satellite imagery. Not surprisingly, when the captain brought these facts to his superiors, they threatened him with a court-martial. Now we know why. Imagine a weapon powerful enough to disrupt global communications, perfectly positioned to strike any major power in the Northern Hemisphere, building standard military base infrastructure, roads, LZs, a Buffalo Wild Wings, would only draw unnecessary attention to it. In order to maintain its perfect secrecy, wouldn't it be better able to hide in one of the most remote, inhospitable corners of the country so that only the true believers skilled in wilderness survival and prepared to brave hordes of mosquitoes and week-long storms could uncover its secrets? With the captain's report, everything came together. Secret bases, government cover-ups, global warfare, ancient aliens, pyramid power, to create the story of the Black Pyramid. The story that Campbell, if he followed any of the internet lore, surely planned his summer vacation around. No one knows for certain if Campbell believed any of this. He may have spent a month poking around every clump of dwarf birch, looking for a secret door to the command center, or, like a bad deer hunter trying to escape his nagging wife, Campbell's quest could have been an excuse for some alone time in the wilderness, to tramp around the woods on a mission that really didn't need a resolution. Regardless, somewhere out there he got himself into trouble. Travel in any direction from Carrie Lake would have been slow, difficult, and dangerous. Did Campbell surprise a bear, fall into a beaver pond, or get caught in a freak snowstorm? No one knows. All the NPS had to go are scattered testimonies and fragments of evidence. Before the plane left, Campbell gave his charter pilot, Jason Sturgis, instructions to pick him up at Carrie Lake in mid-September, right before the onset of the Alaskan winter. After that, Sturgis hopped in his plane and flew back to Talkeetna. That was the last time anyone saw Campbell alive. Sometime in mid-June, Campbell's satellite tech stopped. His wife contacted Sturgis, who told her to call a company flying helicopters to check the site of Campbell's last transmission. The results of her calls, or if she tried a search, are unknown. It wasn't until Campbell missed September 15th, his pickup date, that the NPS sent a search team to Carrie Lake. After a few days beating through the bush, rangers found some of Campbell's gear: cracked food bins, moldy clothes, a battered tent, but no signs of the Wasilla native. The only clues were the rodent-chewed remnants of his diary, buried in his tent. The last entry, dated sometime in late June, simply stated, "Went to get water." Then he simply disappeared. The NPS flew over the area for several days, but eventually had to abandon the search. Campbell, if he was still alive, was hopefully prepared. The icy winds and sub-zero temperatures of winter would come at any moment. Soon snow would cover the landscape and make foot travel virtually impossible. To survive, Campbell would have had to hunker down, but a few tubs of ramen and a Walmart tent wouldn't cut it. Without a larder filled with moose meat and a well-chinked shelter, Campbell was as good as dead. On October 1st, 2020, Campbell was declared missing. Wherever he is, hopefully he found what he was looking for. Somewhere deep in the Alaskan wilderness, the search for the Black Pyramid continues on. Huh. You know what? I'm sorry. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't understand why. Not that he was looking for the Black Pyramid. Whatever. I get that. But why would you go out there by yourself for 4 months? 4 months. In terrain that it sounds like even the most practiced survivalist would think twice about, like, being out there. And this guy goes out there alone. To me, that sounds like you must have a death wish or something going on. Because, and then if something happens, you break a foot, a leg, doesn't have to be. Good luck to you. I mean, to get somebody out there. And then even if you think, well, he's looking for the Black Pyramid, and they're saying, if he read up on it, that they saw an image of it 700 feet down, what are we going to do? Dig to get it? I don't know. That's either he was crazy, or he wanted to go into a new life, and he just said, we'll go 4 months and disappear, and I'll start a new life under another name. One of these two. One or two things is going to happen, I predict. They'll find eventually his remains, and DNA will prove it's him. Or a few years from now, maybe they'll find him living in Miami or someplace like that. So anyway, guys, I hope you like this new set of Eerie News, and until next time, take care.